Today's interview is brought to you by the guys over at Psychotoxin Press. No matter what you're into, they have a story for you. Everything from shorts to novellas to full length novels written by indie horror authors. Please check them out and go ahead and use the promo code HorrorRem10 to get you 10% off of your first order. Check them out, www.psychotoxinpress, or click down on the link in the description below. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Horror Room. I'm Travis Bruce, and today I have an author with us today. He has a new novella out right now. It's called What Vampires Attack. I have my man, Matthew J. Gleason. Matthew, thank you for coming to Horror Room.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Man, it's absolute pleasure. So tell my audience a little bit about your novella.
Yeah, it's called When Vampires Attack. It is about 80 pages, so not very long at all, and it is about a world in which vampirism is essentially like the X gene in Marvel. So anyone can become a vampire at any time, and there's really no way of predicting it. There's constant bloodshed and massacre in a way that the governments and society can't really control. And once someone in your family has become a vampire, you are immediately perceived as being at a much higher risk of becoming a blood-sucking monster and killing everyone around you. So it's following a woman who is 29 on the morning of her 29th birthday. She goes out for pancakes and waffles with her dad, who then proceeds to kill everyone in the diner in front of her. So she is dealing with the fact her dad is now a vampire in a government holding facility, the fact that everyone in the world distrusts her and fears her now, and she's got all this trauma and is trying to find a new life while also dealing with the fact she might be dangerous to every single person around her.
And there's a lot I like that you said Marvel, because there's a lot of, like, it seems a little bit like the X-Men.
Yeah, I just kind of thought of that comparison earlier today, actually. I've just been trying to find a way to pitch that in a simple way, but yeah, it's it kind of Marvel is the light way to pitch that. The dark way to pitch that is I was watching a BBC documentary on extremely brutal offenders, and they were talking about the genetic component and like looking at the scans of fetal brains, and then looking at the antisocial and predatory behavior later repeated. So I was kind of looking at the idea of loving someone who has something that they are not choosing to do, which is inherently negative or dangerous, or dealing with the fact that there might be something in you which is not healthy. So just kind of looking at the fear of oneself and what's in your blood, I guess.
Yeah, and it brings a real, component that, some of us have to deal with. I mean, what if, your loved one becomes a vampire?
Yeah.
You still have to accept them, and even though the rest of the world might ostracize you.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's a lot to be said, and not to get right into heavy stuff, but I think there's a lot of positive things to be said about consequence culture, cancel culture, us having a better standard today than we did, 10, 20 years ago. But there also, where we are living so much in the public eye today with social media, it's so easy to see everything through these moral absolutes, where the moment someone does something that is vile, we perceive them as good or bad. We have this very clear way of labeling and perceiving people for survival. But then what do you do when you deeply love someone who has this conflict with your fundamental view of perceiving the world? And it's kind of about those uncomfortable places we can end up in when we try to live as moral beings in a really complicated world.
So how long did it take you to put together this novella piece?
Okay, great question. I don't actually know if you've heard this before, but There's kind of a couple answers to this, because the initial idea, which is actually separate from the whole genetic component, the initial idea of doing a story that was set at a prison for vampires, which a very small section of this novella is, came to me when I was like 12, so it's been about half my life. The actual writing process, the idea that it would be dealing with the genetic component was a few months before I wrote this, and the actual writing process was for the 3-day novel contest last Labor Day weekend. So I went to a family member's home. I got a bunch of mango monsters, and I isolated myself to one room almost 100% of the time. I took meals outside, and I slept a little bit. But yeah, for 3 days, I wrote this. It was an insanely messy, ugly draft. But
I can imagine.
And then, kind of slowly over the course of a year, I polished and fixed it, and was able to release it. But yeah, 3 days was the actual first draft.
Now, how many times did it take you to rewrite?
That's a great question. I mean, individual chapters that I would say I've rewritten dozens of times. I was kind of the way I do things is I get a rough draft, and then I am essentially the first edit. I'm always trying to look at it through these rose-colored glasses, which are just so harmful to me and slow down the process so much. I'm like, I can fix this with a couple tweaks here and there, and then I end up doing those tweaks, and then I realize that doesn't work, so I end up doing that same inefficient process 35 times, and then I send it to a friend I trust, and then I do another major rewrite. So it's hard to say how many rewrites there are. There's a lot of single lines that are from the original, but it probably amounts to like 40 or 50 rewrites.
And I've heard that's a typical thing when it comes to authors, because you're just constantly changing things, and then like you're like, oh crap, maybe I should do this, and it just becomes this never-ending cycle almost.
Yeah, and so often you come up with ideas later in the process, or you think you've been adding something in because it's kind of been in the back of your mind. Then you get 10 chapters and you realize you haven't included a character that has been intended. I'm kind of going through that right now, where I'm doing National Novel Writing Month. I'm trying to write a second novella that I'm planning on releasing on Valentine's Day. So that's another chaotic process going in the background right now. But
well, I got a heavy back one to promote that in February.
Yeah.
Right. So you get all these pieces together, you get all this rewriting done. Who is the first person that you allow to read your novella?
I've got a couple close friends I have shared it with. I've some of my old roommates, and then Kisto Healy is actually one of the first people who I've had read this once it was ready, just so I could get some feedback. I think you may have interviewed him before. He is another indie horror writer. He's got a Two of a Kind. I'm blanking on the title of this. I just recently read one of his novellas that's set in the deep sea. He's really talented, and he's been really supportive. We met at a convention that I was actually going to help out with, the completely unrelated thing, and he's been really supportive of all my stuff. So a lot of time I will send my work to him to get feedback.
So it has been hard to promote. How's promotion been for you so far?
I mean, that's a complicated question to answer, because I've been relatively successful compared to my previous books, which I have 3 short story collections out called Strange Phenomena. They're all about magazine length and weird fiction. It's been easier to promote this just where it is a single longer book. But, I have kind of been relying on luck and a tenacious attitude here. I've been doing a lot of TikTok, but it's been very hit or miss, as any indie writer will attest. 1 month it'll be, oh, this is looking solid, then things start to dry up. Right now, pretty happy with where things are. A little bit of a slow start to November, but I'm glad to be here, able to talk about it.
Man, listen, I'm gonna do my best, man. I'm gonna do my best. I mean, listen, this is the right place if you're an indie horror writer or filmmaker or anything you could come to. So, all right, so I mean, so you were a big horror fan as well as a Marvel fan. I'm assuming as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty into comics. Marvel was just kind of the comparison that came up today. I was, as far as comics go, pretty across the board, whether DC, Marvel, Dark Horse, Image. I'm a big Neil Gaiman fan in general and Sandman fan. Yeah.
So, who are some horror writers that you've gotten inspiration from?
Okay, that's great. Now, first off, the biggest influence for me as a writer is Neil Gaiman. Whether he's working in horror, dark fantasy, sci-fi, any of the realms he's been working in, just where he has been an influence for me throughout most of my life. I remember seeing the Coraline film in, I want to say 2000, is it either 2008, 2009, and then going out and reading the book, and then reading the Graveyard book, and then as I got older, I was reading the Sandman comics, reading American Gods, reading his short story collections. It's just where he's got so much work for such a wide variety of ages. Another big influence, which I am diving deeper into now, is Clive Barker. I remember when I was a kid, my mom reading The Thief of Always to me, and then I'm actually doing a reread of that right now. And then, of course, The Hellbound Heart. And singular works that have been really influential to me within horror. Chuck Palahniuk, he wrote Fight Club famously, but when I was about, I want to say 14, 15, I read his short story Guts, which is included in one of his collections. I believe it's Stories You Can't Unread, which is a horror story about accidents during masturbation, which was, it was so shocking to me. And I was like, I want to make people feel this way. So a lot of my body horror kind of comes from me wanting to be able to write something like that. And when I was about 12, I read Dean Koontz's Intensity. And for years, a lot of my work, I was writing about serial killers and people doing sadistic acts, trying to convey the feeling I got there. So those are some of the people who come to mind right off the bats. And I've got lots of influences both in and out of horror, but those are some of the big ones that have been really directly influenced my writing style.
Man, that's definitely a great list. I mean, it's an excellent list you have now. So let's talk about a little bit more about your writing style. Is it hard for you? I mean, when it comes to the violence, the you just said the body horror, that was the term. When it comes to being that descriptive in your work, do you ever get to the point where you're like, holy shit, I don't want to go, but there's only but so far I don't want to go, or like, oh, that's a little too far, do I need to peel it back? I mean, or you're like, fuck it, this is the way I want to go, this is the way I'm going to go.
I hear you. Whether there is a line that I want to cross, or whether there's a point where the writer himself becomes discomforted. It's interesting. I've been trying to walk this line because I know not to censor myself or to hold me back, but I tend to not censor myself, but rather lean into the comedic aspect of things, which is something I've been trying to slightly wean off of in recent years, because so often I will write really, really grotesque stuff. I mean, one of my stories that people tend to perceive as very comedic is about a old man poisoning deformed children, I tend to write in the first person. I often, not all the time, sometimes I write third person, but I tend to write in the first person. I often utilize stream of consciousness, and by doing that, I'm able to pull in pop culture references. I'm able to pull in little uncomfortable anxiety memories people have that might someone might be thinking about something embarrassing from their childhood amidst something much more immediately traumatic, and that can make things lighter, even though for the character it is not as it is in no way light. I try to look at the way people kind of compartmentalize their lives, the way that they will react to things in kind of unexpected and unhealthy or ironic ways, and that's all really fun to do. But sometimes I'll show people my darkest shit, and they'll think, oh, that is just comedy. So lately I've been trying to pepper that in, but not do it so heavily, which I found can be a point where it was both about being entertaining to the audience and keeping myself comfortable approaching a heavy subject matter. So I'm not at all interested in holding back from on the subject matter end of things, but I am interested in where you draw that line, where you're holding the camera, and how you're cutting things to present these difficult subject matters. And then as far as, heavy concepts go, like I said, I was influenced by Dean Koontz with Intensity. I'm typically, as a writer, not super interested in, at least these days, exploring the cold, hard reality of say murder or torture, unless there's a supernatural element or there's some angle that I'm coming at that I feel is kind of novel. That's something I enjoy in my media, but it just usually I think sci-fi, horror, fantasy is where I'm coming from. And an example of that is the whole When Vampires Attack thing, where I am exploring stuff that in real life it relates to violent crime and pedophilia, but for me, I'm writing about people turning into vampires and drinking people's blood, which is dark, but it is a much more approachable place artistically than a lot of other people's work, which I admire, and I am just impressed by that other people are tackling this stuff more directly, which is not always where I'm coming from.
I definitely respect that. Now when it comes to coming up with ideas, is your brain constantly going 24/7 with ideas, or do you have to put yourself in the mode to come up with ideas? Okay, I'm going to shut down, I'm going to sit down, come up with ideas, or is your brain constantly going off and you're writing down ideas?
Well, I'm not constantly writing down ideas. I am constantly thinking of things. It doesn't really. Typically, it doesn't require any kind of push there. There are exceptions. Recently, I was having a bit of a bout of depression, which was kind of extreme, and what was weird for me, because I've had issues in the past, but I was having a period where I could not think of any ideas, and just that was really frustrating. But typically, I am always engaging with books and TV and movies, and I'm watching the news. I used to have a subscription to Discover magazine on scientific articles. So I'm always thinking about how I would do something differently. If I'm watching a movie or if I'm reading a book, I'm always thinking about ideally, how I can learn from things. And then, if I am reading a scientific article, like there's this one recently, or in the last couple of years, about people stimulating the brains of mice to turn positive memories into negative ones. There's just, and then another thing about mice brains, they've got computers that, they've got mobile robots that are controlled by brain cells in mice that they've taken out, essentially made cyborgs. So I'm always engaging with real world science, real world news, and then I'm binging Dario Argento films, I'm watching Doctor Who, I'm reading a Neil Gaiman novel, and that's all mixing together, and I just can't not think about how I would do things within that ballpark.
What's the craziest idea you came up with and you decided not to put it down on paper?
Okay, it's easier to answer the first half than it is the second, because that is. As far as stuff I haven't put down on paper, it would have to be like elaborate stuff that is directly related to fan fiction, because I read a little bit of fan fiction, but I'm not usually going to write 85 100 pages of something I am not going to then be pushing somewhere. Because I keep on thinking of the crazy shit, and it's stuff I have written. So I've got a short story that I originally published on the Creepypasta Wiki, and then I've re-released in my collections, called Tremble, which is about a guy turning into a fleshlight. And then I've got a story called, not all of my stuff is hypersexual, just as much as my family perceives it as, but these ones are. I've got a story called Disasterbation, about a world in which all ejaculation becomes maggots, and they turn into giant carnivorous flies that plague the world and hunt humans as prey. I'm not really, I don't typically resist writing something because it is going to be too much. Usually if I'm not writing something, it's because I haven't found the angle that I'm happy with. If I'm going to write about a character, I mean, a lot of my characters have really toxic views on the world, but if I'm not conveying anything worthwhile, speaking of, I mentioned Dario Argento a minute ago. A movie I really enjoy of his, Trauma. My biggest criticism of that movie is that the main character is extremely predatory, and it doesn't seem to be saying anything. Alternatively, I'm a big fan of Todd Solondz's Happiness, which is not traditionally horror, it's like a black comedy, but the main character that I love in that is extremely predatory, and it's saying a lot. So if I'm going to approach an idea, I want to have a reason I'm doing the shocking bullshit and just throwing shit in people's face. So I'm never going to throw an idea off the table altogether.
Okay, that's a good question. Now, I have a lot of individuals who probably were watching who probably love my channel, and they probably are like, boy, I want to start writing. I want to go ahead and make my first novella. What is some advice you can give them?
Okay. First things first, I would say start. So often you are thinking about, well, okay, I've got to have this job lined up. I've got to be in this relationship. I've got to be making X amount of money. I've got to have this 5-day weekend lined up 6 months from now. And you keep on making this list of things. For me, it was all like I was getting on this like weird self-improvement kick where I was writing, but I was like, I can't release anything until I'm so happy with my life and so happy with everything about me. And then you end up realizing 3 years down the road, you've done nothing. So you've got to actually do it. On top of that, there is the very standard advice, which, everyone gives, is that you need to read, you need to engage with stories. I'm sure a lot of people who are watching this, they're looking at all kinds of media to be involved with, whether it's writing a novel, a novella, a short story, a comic, or a movie. You need to engage with all kinds of media, be reading all the time, be watching things, be studying things, because if you're not, it's just going to be insular. So you need to be in love with the genre, in love with the work, and actively doing the work. Otherwise, you're just making a list and procrastinating. And people have looked at the brain chemistry of people who are talking about doing something. And what we've seen, and this is a problem I have, is I'll say, I've got this great idea for a book. Hey, here, let me tell you 35 things about it. And then I get the endorphins released. I get the brain chemicals releasing that are the same as if I had actually done it. So what you need to do is not get on a cycle of releasing those happy chemicals and feeling like you've done something when you haven't. That would be my answer. Actually do the thing. Don't rely on the good feeling of thinking about doing the thing, and also don't beat yourself up or put yourself in a position where you have all these imaginary psychological obstacles which are not to your benefit.
And I agree with you. And I mean, I've said a lot of times with even my YouTube channel, it was 3 years before I finally decided to do it. And like, I made tons of excuses and put it down, and then like, you just got to do it. I mean, if it's something you want to do.
Absolutely. I mean, all the truths of the world can be conveyed in cliches, because there's only so many ways of being a human. But life is very, very short, and you have no idea how short it's going to be. So no reason to hold yourself up.
I agree. All right, so I got 2 random questions to ask you, Matthew. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So the first question is, what are you reading right now?
Okay, I'm very slowly. I say this because I started at the beginning of the year and I've just been picking up randomly. I'm reading A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man by James Joyce. Very slowly. I'm only like 100 pages in. I'm just. I just finished the audiobook for No One Writes for Free by Judith Sonnets. I am separately slowly. I'm reading like a two chapters at a time, 1 or 2 chapters at a time, just randomly every couple weeks, rereading the Thief of Always. And I am also about halfway. This is just also how I write. I'm always doing a million things at once. I'm also reading Death of Superman. I have a paperback of that I found that I bought a while ago, and I'm reading that now. I think that's everything. I also have the Southern Book Club's Guide for Hunting Vampires or Killing Vampires by Grady Hendrix. I've got the paperback of that set to the side, and I'm probably going to get to that pretty soon as well. Oh, and one more thing, I am also listening to the audiobook of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I have read a version of that when I was a kid, and now I'm going back and forth between that and other audiobooks. So yeah, like those 5 or 6 things.
So I'm envious you. I can only do 1 at a time. Like my brain can only focus on 1 at a time.
I couldn't do 1 at a time. I had a little bit of trouble getting into reading as a kid, which is like not to say I wasn't a huge reader as a kid. There was just a period where it took me forever to get into it, where I had teachers and my mom, who is a teacher, working with me. And what I've discovered over time is a big part of that is just, I was talking about brain chemicals. I'm always looking for like immediate reward, and I'm always, it's so hard for me to focus, which is why I'm always writing 5 different stories at a time. I'm always reading 5 different things at a time. A lot of times I'll be watching a movie and I'll pause like a 3-hour movie 5 times and watch an episode of TV. It's not necessarily the most healthy thing, but I found something that works for me to, to experience as much as I can and to get as much done as I can.
See, I wish I could be the way, because like even like with TV shows, like binge watching TV shows, I know people who jump from TV show to TV show and episode. Like I'm like, I can only focus on 1 TV show, like series. I'll finish it and I'll move on to something else. But that's incredible. Next question: who is your favorite vampire of all time?
Favorite vampire of all time? This is probably a cheat, but it's the easiest answer, and it's probably the most common. I'd have to say Dracula. Now, today is the 176th anniversary of Bram Stoker's birth. So happy birthday, Stoker.
Birthday, Stoker.
And I just found that out right before we got on here.
Okay.
As a kid, I was a huge fan of not any adaptation of Dracula or the novel. I was a big fan of The Monster Squad and 2004's Van Helsing. Those 2 versions of Dracula were just like icons to me as a kid. I wanted to be a vampire. I wanted to be like the leader of this monster mash gang. So Dracula. I've got a lot of other vampires that I enjoy. One of my favorite vampire book that I've read recently is The Lesser Dead by Christopher Buehlman. Joey Peacock, the main character in that, he is just such an absolutely wonderful, fascinating character, kind of like a punk rock take on The Catcher in the Rye, kind of just as a vampire and a Star Wars fan, just everything. Just that's a really great book. And then another vampire. I know you said what's your favorite, not what you make me a list. I also enjoy A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. The girl from the title is, if you've seen, I'm not sure if you've seen that, but that is a movie set in Iran about a hijabi vampire hunting predatory and abusive men in Iran, and it's filmed like a Western. It's in black and white. She's a vampire, like essentially a
writing this one down.
It's fantastic. It's really artsy, but still not so up its own ass that anyone can't have fun with it. It's a really great time.
Awesome. So who's your least favorite vampire of all time?
Least favorite vampire of all time. That's not no individual vampire comes to mind right off the bat, but least favorite vampire movie is probably Renfield the Undead, which is not the new Renfield with Nicolas Cage. This one came out like 10 years ago, and that just infuriates me. Shoot. Because I am so not picky. Like usually when I'm engaging with media, I am willing to put myself into the right shoes, the right space. Like I really enjoyed Twilight growing up. I mean, I still I enjoyed the Vampire Diaries books and the show. You know, typically I'll have my nitpicks. Like I am much more annoyed that Twilight vampires don't have fangs than that they sparkle. Because I feel like if you were doing like the creepy fairy thing, the sparkling's fine. The fang, like I want my vampires to have some bite. So Renfield any of the vampires from Renfield Undead. Otherwise, you know, I'm usually here to have a good time, and so long as there's some blood sucking, we can party.
I love some vampires. I mean, except for the Twilight, that way, if somebody asked me, that'd be my least favorite. But I love the vampires in True Blood. I actually enjoyed it.
Oh, you don't like Vampire Bill? Okay.
I like Bill. I love all the vampires in True Blood.
Oh, you like them in True Blood? Yeah, I misheard you. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not very picky. I will say, you know, Twilight is not my ideal way of approaching vampires, especially today. And it's very different than what I do. But I appreciate at least putting things so in the mainstream that then you have the reaction against things, the counter culture, which, you know, I feel if we had kind of let things sit with, you know, where they were, you know, Anne Rice being the most recent cultural touchstone, eventually things become so irrelevant, no one's bothering to do anything with them, or at least prominently. And then things really are dead and not undead.
I agree. Now, do you consider, okay, so this is one last random question. Do you consider Blade, do you consider him a iconic vampire character? Because a lot of people say, well, he's a superhero. He's not really a vampire, isn't it? But I consider him a vampire.
Yeah, I was going back and forth between this Steve Buscemi shirt and a Blade shirt I actually had for tonight. I love Blade. In particular, Blade 2 is absolutely excellent. I know a lot of people prefer the first one just because it is the first one, but I think if we're looking honestly at the franchise, I mean Del Toro, you can't get a better
amazing movie.
But yeah, Blade is absolutely an iconic vampire, I think Blade is a great example of one of the most iconic vampires of the 90s and one of the most influential pop culture vampires for sure.
I agree. So Matthew, where can everyone find you, my friend?
Okay. First off, as far as me making money from you, you can go to Amazon. My name is Matthew J. Gleason. That's the easiest way to find me. I've talked about my collection, When Vampires Attack. Now that's also got an exclamation mark or at the end right there. So if you're trying to find that, make sure to put the exclamation there. As far as my other work goes, I have 3 collections, all called Strange Phenomena. Strange Phenomena Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3. Now, all of these 4 books are available on Amazon as paperbacks. You can also get them as Kindle ebooks. I've priced all of those pretty low. They are also currently available as on Kindle Unlimited for free if you've got the subscription. I'm also looking at going over to godless.com for some of that stuff, just where they promote things a little bit better. And another reason I'm going over and looking at broader distribution is because I will be releasing, at least I'm planning on it, if I get this book ready, a book called Cannibal Sluts 4, which is going to be coming out. If that's what I'm doing in NaNoWriMo, I'm shooting for 30,000 words, going to try to get it ready by February 14th. The premise of that is it is a world plagued by genetically modified nymphomaniacs who've developed a taste for consuming human flesh. And the idea is that it is the fourth entry in a horror franchise that doesn't exist. That's kind of my response to things. Yeah. Things like Jason X.
How about the first three? I was like, where's that one? Okay.
Yeah, you can actually pre-order it right now on Kindle. It's only $2.99, and if it doesn't come out, you don't get charged at all. But yeah, it's kind of my idea of looking at the horror franchises that have kind of jumped the shark, which I really enjoy, and just already having been at that point in the franchise from the get-go is really my goal there. So yeah, you can find all of that on Amazon. Hopefully it'll be on Godless soon. I'm kind of working, sending emails back and forth. And When Vampires Attack, I maybe shouldn't say this because I'd love you to buy it now. It's on Kindle and paperback, but I am also working with a audiobook narrator as of yesterday to try to get an audiobook out by Christmas, which will be on Audible.
Nice.
So Amazon right now, Kindle, hopefully Godless soon, Audible. As far as finding me rather than just giving me money, which I love, you can go to Twitter, Matthew J. Gleason Writer. You can go to I'm on Threads, I'm on Blue Sky, I'm on TikTok as Matthew J. Gleason. Basically, Instagram too. You think of a major social media, I am probably there. Just type in my name. I'll be sharing updates. Facebook. So all of those, and Matthew J. Gleason. Yeah, that's where you find me. That's where you find my work.
Awesome. But everybody, please go out there and grab When Vampires Attack and follow my man, Matthew J. Gleason. Matthew, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on, my friend. And please, listen, hit me up in February, and I'll love to have you back on and talk about this amazing fourth book that never, the first three never happened. I would love to hear about this one. Man.
Awesome. I can't wait. Thanks for having me, and you have a great one.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you for coming to the Horror Room. I'm Travis Bruce. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.